Do you think a badger could really take down a wolf? You know, if it was mad enough? I think it could. Welcome to Well That Was Fucked Up, a series where I talk about scenes that make you think, well, it's in the name. Now on YouTube. This series has done me well on TikTok, so, you know, may as well see if that well hasn't run dry yet. Also, I don't really know how to talk less about things, so this might be a better platform for it in general. If you're a fan of the series or just now tuning in, thanks for being here. Let's see how this goes. The scene we're looking at today is an example of how a movie can go from good to great in one scene. Disney's Robin Hood premiered at a difficult time for the studio. You may have heard of the Disney Dark Ages. Walt Disney's death left the studio on very unsolid ground, both creatively and commercially, and the animated features that followed really struggled to get approval from both audiences and critics. Not only that, the budgets for these animated features started to greatly reduce, so even if they wanted to pull off something bigger and flashier like before, they couldn't. Robin Hood, however, initially did very well with critics and audiences, but the way it was praised leads me to believe that critics were more surprised that the studio was actually able to pull something off without Walt around to help. The biggest complaint being that it was kinda dull. Which is fair. Okay, I'll give them that. You know what? Maybe that's okay. You know, maybe I like having a movie that can just play in the background while I'm doing stuff, like trying to see if the cottagecore aesthetic is for me. And if any story is suited for that meandering, lazy kind of pace, it's Robin Hood. Now, Robin Hood, very dear to my heart. I read as many adaptations as I could get my hands on as a kid. I dressed up as him for Halloween. It was a whole thing. I love that he existed more like an entity that could be put into any situation, rather than having a set canon storyline. Also, it has all the nerdy appeals, like being set in medieval times, operating under a weird political system, having an extensive cast of characters, you know, the works. And the fact that Robin Hood is more of a mythical figure rather than a classic romantic character means that constructing an hour-and-a-half long plot isn't an easy task, which is why the pacing of this adaptation works so well for me. And when it comes to driving home the emotions in this film, that easygoing, slow sort of pace really works in the movie's favor. The plot of this movie feels a little more like two movies put together. After the happy ending of the party after the archery tournament, the tone of the film completely changes once Prince John declares a tax hike on Nottingham. After this point, it feels like a completely different film, much more somber and grave. All the whimsy and boredom is just sucked right out of the room because it's clear that this simple way of life may be taken away from them on the whim of Prince John. It begins to rain, and character traits that were played for laughs before are suddenly played seriously. Friar Tuck and the Sheriff of Nottingham have a classic comedic rivalry going on that sounds like something out of the Andy Griffith Show. There's an early scene in the film where the sheriff is collecting taxes and Friar Tuck explodes on him, but the sheriff just brushes it off in a way that says they've done this before 100 times. But when the sheriff takes the single farthing left by the sexton and his wife in the poor box, this is Friar Tuck's last straw. He is so enraged that he decides to take out what is no doubt at least a decade's worth of frustration on the sheriff, with no regard to his own safety or success. The most heartbreaking part of this scene is the image of Friar Tuck being led away in chains, the last symbol of hope and innocence left in Nottingham, taken to be made an example of. Bookended, of course, by the saddest country song 7-year-old me had yet to hear. The choice to use a country singer as the narrator for this is also an interesting one. When they first tossed around the idea of adapting Robin Hood into a movie in the 40s, they originally considered placing it in the American South. However, the reputation of Song of the South made them reconsider that. Though there are a number of characters with Southern accents, namely Alan Adale, voiced by Roger Miller. Roger Miller is known for his classic country style, and the lovable outlaw trope in country music is very reminiscent of Robin Hood. So I think these allusions work because they communicate a more modern idea of Robin Hood, but they don't make it the entire story in a way that's obnoxious or distracting, or more reminiscent of a more unfortunate film. Also, I couldn't find a way to work this in organically, but Friar Tuck himself is a really interesting literary character because he didn't exist until the May Games celebrations of the late 1400s. And we know this because at the time of Robin Hood's believed conception, friars didn't exist yet. Also, I'll save you the Google search. The difference between friars and monks is that friars lead a solitary life of poverty, traveling, and monks live in monasteries. Ultimately, what makes this scene great is it has all the ingredients for a pivotal moment. We have the representation of good versus evil with the friar versus the sheriff, the tonal shift in music and atmosphere, an elevated sense of urgency with Friar Tuck's arrest, and the strongest element, the fact that it's the film's comic relief characters that deliver it. It's the dramedy formula, and it just works. Plus, we get to hear this line in Piglet's voice, and I don't know, something about that just works.
Give it to him, give it to him, give it to him, Friar!
Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe if you want more over-analysis of kids' movies from the 70s, which has somehow become my niche. Links to my TikTok and Twitter are down below, and I'll see you next time.